being able to know how to communicate on social media is probably a much more important skill today than being able to write a television commercial or a print ad or a paid ad. Just being able to authentically be able to talk and do this sort of organic thing.
Hello everyone, I'm Bianca, your community keeper at Laetro. Today I'm joined by Justin Oberman. Justin is a writer, creative director, strategist, coach, and consultant. Working in the industry for 20 years, he's collaborated with a myriad of brands like Google, Swagbucks, Mercari, Intuit, Lenovo, MTV, Cleveland Clinic, Target, and agencies like Razorfish, CPB, Mother, and more. He also works on the personal brands of several high-ranking marketing executives. Justin, welcome.
Hello, welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. How are you feeling today?
Good. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm feeling very good. I'm like excited to do this. I don't even now remember if I like said this, but this is an activity we've done on Creative Beach before, but it has been such a long time. And so you're like the first in a long time to be like the subject of an AMA at Lecture.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'll start with the first question. It's from Samby Sayward. She's a concept artist and illustrator based out of Greater LA, California. And Samby asks, do you have any advice for working toward a creative direction role as a freelancer?
A creative direction role as a freelancer.
Yes.
You know, it's funny. You spend so much time in the agency world, whether in the big agency world, right? Like you start as a junior copywriter, and then you become a copywriter, and then a senior copywriter, and then associate creative director and creative director. I'm wary of anybody that's actually says that they're freelance creative director, unless they're really actually going in there and directing a team. I read something. I like to keep company with a lot of the great legends in the ad world, and one of them is this guy named Derek Walker, and he posted something on LinkedIn recently, or a long time ago, that kind of blew my mind when I thought about it, and actually made me delete the creative director from my title. But he said that if you don't have anyone to direct, you're not a creative director. You're just a copywriter. Like, so if you're getting hired to do copywriting and they're just hiring you, they're not hiring a creative director, because the creative directors, you do creative work, but it's also a managerial position.
Yeah.
And so you might be doing creative directing, like you might be beyond senior copywriting in your ability to copyright. But if you're being hired as a copywriter or an art director, in her case, then you're not a creative director. So if you're freelancing, it's just best to like sort of know that and understand that and determine whether or not you are really stepping in as a freelancer in order to manage other creatives at an agency or at in an in-house shop for a certain project, or if you are just stepping in to do work, then it's better to just say I'm an art director, or I'm a graphic designer or a copywriter.
I see. Okay. I feel like maybe what she's asking is like, as a freelancer, how do you get to that point? Because I feel like something you're like coming across in your answer here is like, um, with the old system, it's like you kind of like build up to that within a company, within an agency, whatever it is. But with the way the environment is now, like how could someone build up to be a creative director? And then I would assume like they're like creative directing, like for instance at Laetro, maybe they would be hired on to creative direct, and it would be with a team. But how might someone do that like outside of an agency system?
So assuming that we're talking about to come on as a creative director that manages a team,
Yes,
and they have never been in an agency before,
I think so. Yeah.
and they've never managed a team.
Oh no, I would think that maybe like they've kind of. I think that's the idea. It's like, what's the path? Like,
Yeah.
you build up
So
to that, and then
you just have to find a project to manage a team about.
okay.
And the way that I would do it is by any mean in the beginning by any means possible. So
Wonderful.
I would, if you know, even if it doesn't pay a lot, and you can do something that requires you to throw a team together, and and manage a team instead of doing all of the heavy lifting. Um, so maybe actually, if somebody comes and says, "Hey, we'll pay you like $3,000 if you create this website," and you say, "Okay," and you collect the $3,000, and then but then you go and you hire a copywriter and art director to do it, and you manage them, and you don't make most of the money, but now you have the experience.
I see.
I
Okay.
mean, that's how I did it, and well, that's how I've done it. That's how I've told other people to do it. Like,
Okay.
start at the bottom, and that's the thing. You just need the experience. Once you have the experience, then you can say you've have the experience of managing a team and whatnot, and then you can start selling yourself that way. But in the beginning, you have to maybe not make so much money on it or something.
Okay. I think that sounds like a solid plan. I feel like that's definitely the in the vein of like just start and maybe just start small. So maybe it's not going to be like a big project where, you're making a ton of money, but it's like it is a project where you're doing what it is you want to be ultimately doing.
That's the biggest advice that I always have for millennials and Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
Is that they seem to have forgotten to start small. Great careers have started in mailrooms, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
and just don't be afraid to do that. Uh, do really, really drudgy work really, really, really well. Um, it'll train your mind. It'll teach you new things. It'll give you experiences that you can write about later, use about later. But you know, um, it's a it's a thing that a lot of people today seem to want to avoid, but it
Mhm.
really it's really powerful.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much. That's really awesome. Okay. So the next question, why do you study so much history of advertising?
um, well, I think it's just my nature.
Yeah.
I've always, whenever I get interested in something, I for some reason have always been interested in the history of it. It was the only subject matter in high school that I ever liked. And then I didn't
Okay.
study history in college. I studied philosophy, but more or less along those lines of thinking, right? Um,
Mhm.
and analyzing. And I think so. Part of it is that I enjoy it, but um, after a while, it became an absolutely necessary thing for my work because when I'd be working on a product, say, cars or whatever, so then I
Yeah.
would go and I would study the history of advertising, not just of that car, but or that brand, but of all cars, right?
Mhm.
And throughout history, and you see this, you begin to see this cycle that's happening, and you begin to kind of be able to not predict the future, but understand where things are going and better understand. You can kind of say, okay, well, here is where my product is now.
Mhm.
Well, here's where the product I'm working on is now. Here's where the company is now. Here's the situation. And then find a similar, company that was in a similar situation, right? And you can kind of learn what the best type of advertising is to do based on that. Um, It's also a really good way of predicting trends and whatnot. I think it was Marshall McLuhan who, used to criticize people by saying that they were driving by looking at the rear view mirror, and
Mm.
then later in life he amended that, fixed that, and he says, I used to say that, but what I learned and what I realized is you don't look into the rear view mirror in order to see what you've passed. You look into the rear view mirror to see what's coming, right? If a car is coming
Mhm.
on your left side.
Yeah.
And so you can very, very much like look into the past in order to kind of predict the trends in the future.
Mhm.
And that just goes with the industry as well. So, for example, I would say that right now in advertising would not be the best time to um, start a direct response marketing company, because that's phasing out, right? The trend is now, believe it or not, returning back to brand and creativity, and this is something that I could have told you. Well, if you look at my LinkedIn post, did say again, I don't like
Yeah, I was gonna
repeat.
say this is something very familiar to me. I've seen you talk about this at length. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's just sort of an inevitability, and then believe it or not, in 6 or 7 years, you're going to see people going, "Oh, all this brand stuff is nonsense. People don't pay attention to that anymore. The new type of advertising is they'll come up with another name for performance or direct, like it's like a new thing again, and they'll just
Okay.
cycle through it." So, and I also use his as a cheat sheet,
Yeah.
swipe decks. Um,
Okay.
and that's really why. I also just find it fascinating, but
I was
but I
gonna
think
say,
I think a lot of people can, if they really got into it, they could find it really useful. And nobody ever wants to hear about it. Like if you ask people, "Oh, do you want to hear about the history of advertising?" No. Why would I want to hear that? But it's funny because if you go to TED Talks or if you
mhm,
listen to talks or speeches, people always begin with a story, and maybe it's a
yeah,
story about um, a certain campaign, and you use that in order to prove a point,
yeah,
and people love that. History is a story, right? His story, whatever,
yeah,
and
absolutely,
so it's a fun way to learn about advertising.
definitely, definitely hear you on that. I feel like sometimes maybe it's like the brand of history is not. They think that sounds like appealing, and it's like actually, let me just reframe this, and it all of a sudden becomes exactly what someone wants to hear.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of relatedly, on LinkedIn, I saw recently that you recommended the book Adland by Mark Tungate. What other book recommendations do you have for advertising and marketing history?
Oh, well, there is so in terms of like the advertising, about the history of advertising,
Yes.
the one of the quintessential books is the Mirror Makers by Stephen Fox. Um, and what I then would recommend is that in his book, he references other books.
Okay, cool.
And there's another, um, oh God, there's another advertising history book. It's a big, thick book that was published in 1921. I
Oh,
bought it for
wow.
$100. I saw it at a bookstore. So it's the history of what's interesting about it is that it's the history of advertising up until 1920, the 19 early 1920s,
Mhm.
which is really when what we consider modern advertising today was just beginning.
Okay.
It's like that's the point where where advertising agencies actually started offering creative services. That's when Lord and Thompson, began in Chicago. Um, it's really the beginning, and so you get this perspective from this book. Oh God, what is this called? Um, you get a very interesting perspective of it of advertising because it's before. Um, I'm not going to be able to find it. Before before advertising became what we know it today, and so it um, and and a lot of those things are really interesting to think about and learn about, and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think this sounds like a fun mystery. I think we're gonna find the answer to this after, and when we find it, we can post it. So yeah,
Yeah,
wonderful.
absolutely.
Okay, cool. Those sound like great recos, and I actually already got well, I have Adland coming to me to my local library. The moment you talked about it, it was like whoop. So
Yeah,
hopefully I'll be getting that soon. But I will
the,
absolutely
the
look into
Mirror
the
Makers
mirror
is also,
makers.
yeah, the Mirror Makers focuses on the U.S. and the
Okay.
U.K. and the U.S. What Adland is really good at is that um, it talks about other countries.
Yeah.
The other really good advertising history books, and it's sort of an unintentional advertising history books, are the two books by Paul Feldwick. One of them is called Humbug Something. The other one's called Why Did the Peddler Sing? And what's interesting about those is that it studies the history of advertising, but it studies it from a strategist point of view, and from a theory point of view, of then highlighting the different types of, and puts them within a context of the different types of advertising that you basically have available to you, and like
Okay.
kind of attaches them to different personalities. And you can kind of guess that the one that Paul like pushes is as the ultimate advertising strategy is that the one created by P.T. Barnum, who actually is the George Washington of advertising.
Oh.
A lot of people, like we can find ads that go all the way back to Byzantium and stuff like that. But if you really want to know when advertising and branding and all of these things really started to become something that businesses started to pay attention to, it's really with P.T. Barnum, because when you analyze him, he did it all.
Mm.
He did direct marketing, he did publicity, he did branding, he did personal branding, he did he was a one-man band when it came to these things, and he didn't have like names for them. Like he just did them all, and they were all important to do. And there's just such an important lesson in that they're not competing things. There's no one best thing.
Yeah.
The ultimate thing is to do branding and to do direct response and to do publicity and to do, but you have to have the energy of a man like P.T. Barnum,
Yeah.
and your organization has to have the energy of a man like P.T. Barnum in order to do it. But there's no doubt in my mind that, or in his mind even, that when you do that,
Mm-hmm.
you will be successful. And so, besides books about advertising history,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to go back to original source material, you should definitely read P.T. Barnum's autobiography, or specifically just the section that he has. He used to give like a lecture tour about how to make money. And in that, there's a lot of really good advice about advertising. So I strongly recommend everybody read his book, directly his knowledge, or his autobiography. And then also just to go straight to the greats, right? To read David Ogilvy's book, on advertising, to read Rosser Reeves' book, to read, and of course, my favorite, Howard Gossage. So you can get the Book of Gossage, which is all of Howard Gossage's like work.
Mm-hmm.
And then very recently, Dan Dye and Steve Harrison released a book called The Howard Gossage Show, which really puts a lot of that into context
Mm-hmm.
of basically how to use it today. And Howard was also kind of like a P.T. Barnum in the sense that he kind of just melded everything together. So going to the original sources and reading these guys, you don't have to agree with everything they say, and a lot of the techniques are outdated, but don't confuse the techniques with the wisdom. That's all I'll say.
Okay. Wonderful. Awesome. Okay, well, on deck, we have a question from Roger McGrath. He is a copywriter based out of County Dublin, Ireland. And Roger asks, how do you go about writing your LinkedIn posts? How do you come up with and choose ideas? How do you craft them? And of course, he sends
Oh,
his thanks. And very similar to the question, how do you write LinkedIn hooks?
oh boy.
Big question.
It's going to disappoint so many people because everybody just wants a formula.
Oh,
And my approach to LinkedIn is it's the same approach that I kind of have to advertising. And this evolved over time, but very, very over time, I began to learn that LinkedIn, organic posting on LinkedIn, um, that world is it really is just it's a brand awareness game.
okay. How do
I
you
mean,
define organic posting?
you just like, no, you're not paying for the posts, right?
Okay.
You're just
Just
posting,
wanted to make
right?
sure you did.
Yeah, yeah. So it it's a brand awareness game, and to prove it, look, I don't have like 100,000 followers. I've close to 40 at this point.
Mhm. Yeah.
All of them are earned. No tricks, no nothing.
Mhm.
All I do is I don't really pay attention to algorithm, and I know that sounds cliche, but I really don't. There's certain things that I know not to do that I mean, it seems like when I do that, the post doesn't do well. But I just really sit and think like, what's the best content that I could write? I just focus on the content, making good content, and I have a leg up because I'm a copywriter, so I can figure it out easier. I know all the story formulas and writing formulas and stuff like that. And what I've really landed on was, what a lot of the formula people try to tell you is, you're selling something. So you want to have this and make it short and the bullet points and then the call to action and all that stuff. When really all you just need to do is create something engaging that people like. And the more, if you post every day or 6 times, I do 6 times a week. If you post, every day, and enough people like each post, you're just on people's feeds. Like most people only follow, up to 1,000 people. So you dominate people's feeds. You're always there,
Mhm.
um, and you and as long as what you're writing about is somewhat remotely connected to what you're doing.
Yeah.
For me, it's easier because I'm a copywriter. So in a way, I can write about anything because my writing is the example, right?
Mhm.
So they see and I write something, they like the way I write, so they hire me, right? But if you're selling ready-made tulips or something, like you have to kind of find another thing to become a thought leader about. And so you could write about starting a business,
Mhm.
right? What it's like, and occasionally talk about the flowers, right? But if all you ever do is talk about tulips and flowers,
Mhm.
you're going to become kind of boring really fast. So you have to, because how much could, I mean, maybe not.
I was about to say, I think a bunch of people could find a ton of ways to talk about tulips and
Yeah,
flowers,
yeah. So
especially in like a analogy type way, blooming, dying, seasons of
yeah,
life.
I think the analogy would become cliche, but like if you want to
Okay.
like start offering gardening tips and then you
Yes.
you have like a lot of links that you can go to talk about that are kind of related to it, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so and also just also whatever you're doing in your personal life is also fair game. And the goal is to just be in front of people all the time. And you just make a majority of those posts that. And then every once in a while, it's the Gary Vaynerchuk jab, jab, right hook. Every once in a while, you can put like a sales message in there. Realize that that
Yeah.
post is probably not going to do as well as the others.
Mhm.
How do I go about writing them? Coming up with ideas. I read a lot.
Okay.
That's really it. I read a lot. I think a lot. Um, I and because of that, I have a lot of opinions, and I'm not afraid to write about them. And I'm not afraid to be wrong, and I'm not afraid to be told I'm wrong, and I'm not afraid to admit that I'm wrong in the comment section on a post. And I just write in order. Sometimes I write a post in order to clear my head of an idea, or to see if I understand an idea, or sometimes I write a post to test an idea and see what other people think, whether whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. And sometimes I just find something so incredibly interesting that I write about it. And sometimes I come across a technique that I find myself using a lot and say and think that it can help people,
Mhm.
and and write that. And that really at the end of the day is you write a LinkedIn post in order to help people, but don't confuse help with like benefit solving problem that I offer.
Mhm.
Help could literally just mean making somebody smile that day.
Yeah.
It could just be like an emotion. It could just be something like, and you'll see some of my posts. I end all my posts with the same call to action, like to share, right? Because on LinkedIn, once you like it, it also other people see it.
Yes.
I very rarely ever say like, "What do you think? What do you?" And that actually gets more engagement when I don't ask for it.
I
Because
see. Okay.
right, as long as when I'm writing about is stimulating, controversial, then people will tell me I'm wrong. People say I'm right. I'm an idiot. This, that, or whatever. It's fine. Um, and
Engagement is engagement.
engagement, and I think also that a lot of people are afraid of that they're stealing. Like they'll read something interesting in a book, and it's like,
Mm,
well, I can't post that because this author wrote it. There's nothing new under the sun. Where do you think that author got the idea from? There's no new ideas, right? There's only better ones. There's only better ways of um, expressing it. I'll give you an example.
okay.
This will help. That one of my most recent posts was about the power of branding and why people should pay more attention to branding. And what happened was is I was reading Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power, and in that, one of the laws is like, secure your reputation.
Okay.
And he tells this story about this Japanese antique dealer who finds a bowl, and it's not really worth much, but he buys it anyway because he thinks it's interesting, and then so everybody thinks now this bowl is worth a lot of money, and all these different things happens. It even breaks, and he glues it back together. And long story short, in the end, a very famous Japanese tea ceremony person comes to see this celebrated bowl and buys it for tons and tons of money.
Okay.
And Robert Greene was telling the story in order to kind of talk about how important your reputation is. But I read it and I was like, well, that's also a really, really good example of um, that's a really, really good example of branding, like the importance of branding. Because the tea ceremony guy at the end who bought the bowl, did he buy a bowl, or did he buy, I forget what this guy's name was, like a Fukiwana or something like that, which was the guy's last name. Like he didn't buy the bowl, he bought this guy's reputation,
Mm,
right? He
yeah.
he bought, and more than that, he bought the story that
Hmm.
that around this bowl, and that's branding, right?
Hmm.
And so one of the benefits of branding is branding can make average things cost more and justify it. Like we see it all the time, like with Gucci belt. What's a Gucci belt at the end of the day, right? It's
Hmm.
a Gucci belt because it's Gucci,
Hmm.
right? But like at the end of the day, it's a belt, right? And so it's it's I read that story, and I I wasn't scared. So I just started the post by saying this is one of the best stories about that, about branding that I've ever heard. And then I
Mm,
just took the story that he had and rewrote it in my own way,
hmm.
in my style, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't plagiarize. I didn't like copy any of his sentences or anything, and then kind of ended it with a summary. Like he ends it a summary of why it's important for the reputation, and I ended a summary of why branding, it's important. This is an example of why it's important to do branding, if you want to achieve a goal like this, And so I think a lot of people would be afraid to do that, and you
Sure.
just shouldn't be. Like it's a social media platform. You're sharing knowledge, and the best social media is not stuff that you create for social media. It's the stuff that's happening around you that you share. That's how people not in marketing use social media, right? Look what
Hmm.
I'm doing. Look what I ate. Look what I just bought. I just got married. I'm here. I'm traveling. They're sharing the world around them. For
Hmm.
some reason, brands forget that. They think, oh, I got to create content. It's like,
Hmm.
no, you should also share what's going on around you or in your head or whatever. And that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Hooks, to answer his other question. Oh, how do I write them?
Hmm.
How do I write my posts? Um, it's intuitive to me at this point.
Okay.
I have, but basically, I have like 5 different styles. So, is this a story post? Is this a how-to post? Is this a whatever? I am known for doing this annoying like one sentence thing, you
Hmm.
know, which I you know learned from Dave Trott, but it just to me it makes it easier, and that's how I think and write or
Can
whatever.
I ask for clarification? Do you mean like it's one sentence and then you indent one not indent, but just like
Yeah,
so they're not big paragraphs. It's just
one
yeah,
sentence
yeah,
paragraphs,
yeah. I
and
feel like that
sometimes
works really well.
and then to make the rhythm, to do that all the way down is annoying. So it's there are certain sentences that I'll have like 3 or 4 sentences in,
Yeah.
like when it's all one idea. Um, so that's the writing part, and that's just like your personal style. Like I don't have anything to say about that, but the real magic is in the editing. It's writing is interesting. Writing is not about writing. Writing is about it's a 10% of writing is writing. Most of writing is thinking of an idea and then editing it, what you write.
Yeah.
It's really like human press. Like AI can kind of never really do that, but but it can really do the middle part really well if you want it to, if you train it to.
Mhm.
And so then I have an editing process that I am in the works of putting together, and I'm going to sell it. It's a 30-part editing process. And the way I think about it is like it's like hunts. You hunt for certain things. You hunt for um, prepositions, and you hunt for big words, and you hunt for long sentences, and you do these like hunts. Um, so if you have a long sentence, you break it up. If you have a,
Mhm.
and then if you're saying he or they a lot, you replace that with either like the person's name that you're talking about, or with a fun description of that person, like the Prince of Copy, or something that spices it up.
Yeah.
The editing process is really, to me, even more than an interesting idea. That's where great copywriters cross the bridge from mediocre and regular ones. It's all in that editing process. It's that polish.
Mhm.
Um, and it's interesting because I was thinking about doing the course, and then somebody goes, "Well, why can't you just take your rules, your hunts, and put them in AI, and have AI did it?" And I'm like, "Oh, let's see what happens if you do that." And I did it, and it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible because editing, it's like a nuance that it's like that's a feeling, right? You're looking for rhythm, and you're looking for different things, and it's not that these are rules and these are hunts, but at the same time they're not. You don't apply all of them all the time, and sometimes it's okay to do this and start a sentence with an and this and that. And AI doesn't like that. AI is not nuanced. Like it just uh, you train it to follow rules, and
Mhm.
follows the rules. So um, I still think that is a very, very important skill. Is the editing. So you want to have something to write about, then you want to vomit on a page, and then you want to edit, and
Yeah.
then that's really hooks are a whole thing. I won't get into them right now. I'll just give you one really awesome tip.
Okay.
Um, so you can go and you can buy like a templates of hooks. Like there's all these people that online they sell. Like I tested, here are my best performing
Mhm.
posts, and here are the hooks, and yeah, they're kind of good hooks, right? Like how to, or this, you know, this, this is if you're a blank, then you're going to want to hear this, or so, whatever. You can buy these hooks,
Yeah.
and you can either use those hooks as a stimulus to then write something. I
Mhm.
know people that do that, and that's probably a better way of doing the opposite, which is writing something and then trying to find one of these hooks to like wedge into this post that you just wrote about. Um, Either or of, like I said, the first option is better, but the problem is that those hooks, people are beginning to recognize those hooks, and hooks that get used a lot,
Mhm.
and are sort of vague and then lead to things that are like not promised in the hook. What do we call them? Clickbait, right?
Mhm.
And people always ask me like, how do I write? So, and sometimes I use them. I'm not going to lie, um, but most of the time I don't. And people always ask, how is it that you write such compelling hooks that are just such a part of what you're writing? So the way I do it is when I sit down, I write the post,
Mhm.
and I just start writing, and I will write whatever hokey hook I think I need to start the post, or whatever. I'll just start it,
Okay.
I'm just writing, and I'll basically write it not for LinkedIn. Like I'll write it for like, it's like a newspaper article or a blog post, which actually doesn't require the same type of hook that a LinkedIn post does, because an article will have a title, right? It's a different medium. right? LinkedIn, you're scrolling, so that hook has to grab you. So I'll just write it like an article.
Mhm.
And then what I'll do is, and this only really works for long posts, is I will start at the first, and because I write line by line, this makes it easier. It's a little harder if you're writing in paragraphs. But then what I will do is I will count 7 lines down. I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'll read that line. And it's usually that line or a line 2 sentences up or a line 2 sentences down that I'll then take and make that my hook. And sometimes I'll have to maybe like rejigger something a little bit in the beginning to like make it work, but usually not a lot. And there's 2 reasons why this works. And then so now I have a hook that's totally tied in with my subject matter and is totally unique and is totally not from a template.
Yeah.
And the reason why this works is psychological and practical. It's psychological because it's actually a technique that screenwriters use a lot, right? To make a scene interesting, they will start in mid-conversation, right? Like if you ever like all of a sudden pick up a conversation at a diner or at a restaurant, you're like, what? What's going on? And so when it's kind of like starting, it has that feeling of starting mid-conversation, like mid-thought, mid-whatever.
Mm. Yeah.
The second reason why it works so well is because the most common thing that people do in writing long form content or LinkedIn posts is bury the lead, right? So they get long winded in the beginning, they explain themselves, and then they get to their point about 7 or 8 lines down. And
Yeah.
so pretty much that's where that
People kind of
is.
jump.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where that hook is, And so you can just basically buried the lead. Doesn't mean sometimes I'll get rid of the whole top part, but it doesn't mean you have to do that. But it just means there's your lead,
Mhm.
there's your hook, take that, put it up there, and now and now and now and now you have a better hook. Because remember, a hook is about getting attention,
Mhm.
but it also needs to kind of let people know what this is going to be about.
Mhm.
So sometimes a hook like you're going to want to read this or blah, 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 like that's going to sometimes that'll work, but it becomes so cliche. It's like unless I know who the person is that's writing it,
Mhm.
like when I write something like that, maybe more people will click it because what's Justin? What is okay? What does he have to say? But when other people don't do that, then but when people don't know who you are,
Mhm.
then who cares? So a lot of times, it's kind of important to like let people know what this is going to be about. You don't want to give away too much information, but kind of want to. That's the one piece of advice that I would give about writing a hook.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much.
That was a long answer to
It
well,
was, but
it was a big question. It was a lot of
it was, and I feel like the best stuff can just be found by like going through that and really listening to that whole just like thought process. And so, sometimes a short answer isn't the best answer. It's just
yeah.
like, So on deck, our next question: what trends do you predict will dominate the advertising industry in the next 5 years? How should companies and independent creatives prepare to adapt?
You didn't put the question up there.
Yeah, I realize.
Okay. It was long, and then I'm like, I need to read it. How
Yeah.
should companies and independent creatives prepare to adapt? What trends do you predict will dominate the advertising industry in the next 5 years? So, like Bob Hoffman, I don't like to predict the future. Actually, I will tell people one of the first things, if anybody calls me to consult with me, I'll tell them, and they're like, and then, we want to see these results. And I'll be like, hold on a second. There are no guarantees in marketing. I'm not one of those guys. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't understand half the time why anything works, right? I just have that skill, that gut artist sort of creative reaction to do it. So everything that I'm going to say here um, should be understood under that context.
Understood.
That I don't like to necessarily try to predict the future. But I will say that great, but everything before but is nonsense, or after but is nonsense. Or one part is lying, one part's not. The from studying the history of advertising, I will tell you that we are due for a creative revolution. The creative revolution in the 60s, and then it stopped in the 70s, and then it came back. We switched back to brand and creativity in the 80s, and then in the 90s we went back to a lot of research and stuff like that. And then in the 2000s the internet came out, and that caused another creative revolution. And then it's interesting actually when you think about it. The creative revolutions seem to happen when new mediums come into play. So in the 60s, television became way more popular than it was in the 50s, right? And so you see this creative revolution, right? And then it becomes a kind of a science, right? And then in the 80s, I don't really know what the new medium would have been in the 80s, but it's like cable TV, like just like more TV
I have a question actually
TV
about all
stuff.
this.
Yeah.
When did VHS come out? Do you think that could be
Oh, that could
something that
be.
could
Yeah.
affect, like,
Yeah.
people being able to watch something later instead of having to watch it when it was broadcasting?
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
VHS and cable and stuff like that. So that caused another creative revolution because now the ads have to be better, more entertaining, work harder. And that kind of went into the 90s. Like, I grew up in the 80s. Some of the best commercials that in the history of advertising happened in the 80s. And big brand, these brands just some of these brands don't even need to advertise anymore, like
Yeah.
because they use TV so effectively. Um,
Hmm.
and then,
Can you name some of those brands?
well, I always like to like Tough Actin, Tinactin, Tums,
Mm,
Pepto Bismol. Like what if you went into a drugstore and you're like, I got to get something for indigestion or whatever, you can get Tums, or you're going to get Alka-Seltzer, right?
mhm.
And my daughter like will go in and buy. I'm like, why'd you buy Alka-Seltzer? Well, because that's what you buy. My daughter hasn't seen an Alka-Seltzer ad in her entire life,
Yeah.
except for the old ones that I show her, right? But I don't even think that she's seen those. You know what I mean? Like, and it's and she buys them. These brands, they've spent billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars with the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s using the most mind entrenching medium on the planet, television, that they're so embedded in people's culture that like they don't need to advertise anymore. Like, Coke does because Coke has Pepsi, right? But like some of them don't need to, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, which is room for disruption, by the way, because if somebody comes along and makes a better Tums
Yeah.
ingredient and then uses something like social media, organic social media, to build a brand up really fast,
Mhm.
they could hurt Tums, and Tums would probably be too slow to keep up. But anyway, and so that's part of this prediction. Actually, is what I'll say is that. So then you had the 80s and the 90s, and then the internet comes out, and then you have all of this fun, creative stuff happening with the internet, subservient chicken, people really pushing the boundaries of what the internet could do. And then, Facebook and Google come along, and as some famous article or some CEO of Omnicom or whatever it was, told Sergey and Larry, you're, I'm going to curse, you're fucking with the magic, right? Because what they'd said is, oh, all that mystical stuff about advertising and how you can't track it because it's on television and all the brand stuff.
Mhm.
Well, that's out the window because now we can just totally track the advertising.
Mhm.
And of course, that just made all advertising direct response. And that became like literally the predominant thing. You couldn't even talk about brand from like 2010 or 2013 until like 3 years ago. Like you just like
Mhm.
it was just totally dominant. Like my world, like from that point on, I was writing Facebook ads and Google ads, and oh, you do television commercials? Well, like, yeah, well, that's only for the big brands to do. And like the marketing world just became totally fragmented. Um, and creativity became so much less important um, in the eyes of people. And So we're due now for a swing in the other direction.
Hmm.
All it needed for that to happen was a new technology. And I think that new technology is AI. Oddly enough, I think that AI is going to be the cause of the creative revolution,
Hmm.
the not
Destruction.
the destruction of it, because um, as somebody on LinkedIn, I've read this. I wish I can credit people more. I just read so much that I forget. But somebody wrote something very clever, and they said, "I don't use AI to be creative so that I can do my laundry and do my dishes. I want to use AI to do my dishes and my laundry so that I can go and be more creative." Right?
Yes, I'm so upset. Dave, one of the co-founders and chief creative officer, he was just talking about this guy the other day. Dave was being interviewed on Scratch Claw Push, one of the creatives in Laetro, one of their podcasts, and he mentioned this person, and I can't remember their name either. But yes, exactly
Oh,
that.
he read the same thing. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but what's really interesting to think about that is when you think about it,
Mhm.
um, all of the people running agencies, they're like, oh yeah, now we can get rid of copywriters because or art directors because AI can do that for us. I'm like, oh yeah, really? Who's going to input that stuff? Like you're missing what like they're so entrenched in this old way of doing it of 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 what Facebook and Google caused with turning ads. They think that creative is just uh, is a process, right? It's just a thing that needs to be created. They don't
Refined
realize that it's
process.
the
Yeah.
ideas right behind it, and it's the pushing the envelope. Like AI can mimic anything, but it can't come up with new ideas without a human being,
Hmm.
right? And without that interaction. And so um, it's really them that are replaceable. Because now, what do I need a manager for? What do I need, somebody handling the billing for? What do I need the number crunchers for? I mean, what do I need a media buyer for, right? If I'm just doing programmatic or like what do I like I can have someone do my sales calls and this, and I can have AI handle all of that stuff so I can just be creative. They're the ones that are replaceable, not us. And so I think what I have learned from AI,
Hmm.
uh, I like to say the people who are using AI in a revolutionary way are the ones who are not talking about it, right?
Hmm.
They're just using it as a tool. I just use it as a tool. It has made my work better, faster, you know, and more and allows me to be more creative because it takes away a lot of the the grudge work that went with it and around it and all
And
that
to
stuff.
you, as a creative, what is that grudge work?
Well, as a writer,
Hmm.
a lot of it is research. A lot of it is really just like having like multiple files with multiple things. So like when I have a client and I'm writing for them, whether it's personal brand, like ghostwriting for them on LinkedIn or a regular brand,
Hmm.
um, I have files of, swipe decks and things that are related to them and power words and alternative prepositions like I talked about. And I have, you know, I go and I do things like I go research the subject matter or the product or whatever I can about it on Amazon and read reviews and get and take insights and things that people say about the reviews. I will collect Southern slang about the topic. I will collect all of these things, and I usually just have them all over the place. But now I can just have all of them in an AI chat, and I can literally ask the AI chat to look these things up for me, right? And I can literally, then have it segment things out, and I can have it there, so that when I need to do find a new preposition for he, whatever, I can ask instead of going and looking it up or whatever. I can ask AI, hey, can you give me 5? Can you give me 10?
Hmm.
Right? Or I'm having really hard time with this sentence or explaining this. Can you give me some alternatives? Or I have no shame in doing that. Like I would do that anyway. It would just take me a lot longer, right? And I don't use it to write anything for me. Like I never uh, have it like I know some people use it to like will write a first draft or whatever, and I actually have no problem with that either. I just don't because um, I don't know why I don't do that. Maybe I should experiment with it. But it's that that's part of the tedium that it gets rid of. I think the answer to that question is going to be different for everybody because everybody has their own little thing that annoys them.
Mhm.
For some people, it's simply just having to go between two tabs. Like they just hate that. Like I don't know, everyone has their thing,
Yeah.
and like AI can just solve event, and eventually we'll be able to just solve for like all of those things, and that's wonderful. It gets rid of all the so that's what I'm saying. Like agencies, they're the ones that should be scared. Like, because what do I, they go and they fire senior creatives. It's the stupidest thing they can do because those stupid. It's the creatives that don't need them, and just creatives just need to wake up to that.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are, and then that's what's going to cause the creative revolution because now more people can be creative than ever before. More people. So you see all of these things, Sona, like, or whatever, these movie scapes, right? That they create.
Mhm.
And that you can create with ChatGPT. You just type in, like, I want an astronaut walking down New York City, whatever, right? And it creates this thing and it looks like, oh my God, it looks so real. And then, a lot of people criticize it. Oh, yeah, well, but where's the story? Where's the creativity? First of all, they're just showcasing the technology. But that's the point. The point is all these people who got rid of creatives and say, well, now I have the tool to just make the video.
Yeah.
They're going to create crap. They're going to like create stuff that looks like stock footage. Like it will be no different than stock footage. It'll just be original stock footage, right? Forget about the fact that you're stealing from multiple sources and all that stuff. But like,
A breathtaking number of
right.
people.
But
Yeah.
but now imagine, that like all-star creative director that you just fired because he's got 3 kids and cost too much money, you know, but who created great campaigns for a lot of your clients, like really original work, really original thinking. That guy, you just let him loose, and now he has this tool.
Mhm.
And the minute he or she realizes that I can make my crazy ideas come to life using this tool, they're toast. They're going to like scramble to try to hire these people again, but they won't be able to because they'll all be in Laetro and totally happy, right? Like that's the goal, right? Like why would you go and work for them again? You don't need them. You don't need them anymore. And you can have AI do your invoicing. You can have AI do your accounting. You can have AI do all of these things. Write
Yeah.
your SOW. There's a great tool called Jaunt Boards that literally will write an SOW for you. Right? You can just get on the phone call, talk to them, take that chat, put it
Yeah.
in, and it'll write your SOW.
Yeah.
Boom. What do I need an account manager for? Like it's really um, liberating. And so you're going to see all of those great creative people once they wake up to this, they're just going to start creating great work, and the brands are going to love it. And not only that, but I predict that you're going to see people who have never ever been even worked in ad agencies before um, enter the field
Mhm.
like almost automatically. You're already seeing it, by the way, with creators, right, on TikTok and stuff like that. Like
Mhm.
those are kind of the new ad agencies, if you ask me, right?
I was gonna say, I feel
Yeah,
like it's something I've seen. I really love YouTube, and there's a number of people I follow on there. And I've definitely seen people talk about before, just, even just from jump, but certainly, like 10, 15 years ago, people who didn't know how to edit video, but like they can now because the tools became way more accessible. And so it's like they don't know what all of the workflows are like or the language, but they clearly have the capacity to do that. And so I feel like just what you're talking about, seeing it again, or people who maybe thought they couldn't be creative or didn't know how to express their ideas. It's like Gen AI can be a very accessible tool for those people, and it can be what is their entree into this creative industry. So, I mean, it should
Yeah.
be interesting to see where that goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think I have one more question for you.
Sure.
Um, over your 20-year, oh, let me do this. Over your 20-year career in the creative industry, what project or campaign do you consider your most significant accomplishment and why?
This always shocks people. I don't know if it's my most significant accomplishment. I'll tell you that when I think back and when people ask me a question like that, or they say, what is the most, or what's the one that you had the most fun on, or whatever. When I worked in-house at Swagbucks, so I was brought in originally, it was very much a tech company, and I was brought in to kind of turn it into more of a lifestyle brand. And so we did, and we went in and we rebranded it. And, I said, we got to focus on the fun. Yes, it's a coupon cutting type atmosphere. It's people who are like saving for money, who trying to save money, and people who will write, customer service over 3 pennies that they didn't earn for watching a video. Yes, it's that
Mhm.
environment, but I, what I noticed about the community is they like to have a lot of fun. And so after I branded that, one of my tasks was to to make to find ways to make it more fun, and create games, that people could earn the swag bucks, the points for. Um, and so I came up with several games, but one of them that I did, it just kind of just started, is I created this competition that existed on the blog, which was a very archaic blog at the time. It had a comment section that it didn't you couldn't even like layer the comment section. It was just like it was just straight down.
Mm.
And I I created this this contest called Swaganigans, you know, which
Oh, okay. Yeah.
which was a play off of the word shenanigans.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of borrowed the idea from the thing called the Style Invitational that's in the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post or one of those things. And it was word games, like really, but sophisticated word games. And I wrote it with a very irreverent sort of tone.
Mhm.
And I created a character, and I borrowed like a woodcut image of like an old man, like balding, who just like looked like he, was just like a stern disciplinarian, but also kind of a kooky grandfather at the same time. And I
Okay.
called him the Swagador, off of like the name the Commodore.
Yeah.
And he would introduce this contest, and it would be something to the extent of, you know, it would have some sort of like, I just like made up stuff about him. I'd be like, today I have my boat off the coast of Bali,
Mhm.
and I talked about how he likes to collect and drink absinthe, and people actually like mailed me absinthe or mailed the Swagador absinthe to the headquarters. It's very weird. And so um, and it would be something to the extent of like, today's contest is I want you to visit, and it would be a Swagbucks client that was a bookstore, right? Visit this online bookstore, um, take 2 titles, mash them together, and tell us what it's about. And then put it in the comments, and people would, and like there were rules, like you can 9 entries and this and that, and the top prize you get 25,000 swag bucks, which was $25, right? A lot of money, and then there was like different tiers of the prizes. And then below that, I would then do last week's winners.
Mhm.
Um, and what would end up happening is the entry levels were getting so big that in order to keep track of them, I'd have to basically go in every day and keep track of them. But I would go in as the Swagador and comment on people's posts. If they broke the rules, I would eliminate them. I would tell some people that their idea that was stupid, or I would react to the book.
Very in character.
Like I just stayed in, and people loved it.
Yeah.
Oh, they loved it, and I was having so much fun. And that's when, and I think if you go to the blog, I think something happened to the blog, and most of them got eliminated. Unfortunately, I still have all of them saved in a Google Drive somewhere, but most of them got eliminated. And but I um, You can still go to the Swagbucks blog and probably type in Swaganigans and see 2 or 3 of them. But what occurred to me at that moment was, you know, when I went in-house at Swagbucks, I was coming from the world of, ad agencies. Advertising is TV commercials, print ads, blah, blah, blah. And that's the first time that it occurred to me that this is the new medium, social. The blog post I consider like social, like the internet, right? This is the new way. This is going to be the new way of building a brand. And if I had stayed around longer, I would have pushed actually like make this guy a mascot, make this guy, put him on the cover of Swagbucks, because people were really, I mean, thousands of people were beginning to enter the contest. People were joining Swagbucks in order to be able to participate. And it was very actually difficult for a lot of the senior management there to realize what was going on, because they were either coming from such a direct response world that like either that was advertising or it was brand that was advertising. And, it took a while for them to see the potential of this. And then I left and then somebody else took over. Well, I was working with somebody, and we even created a character for him. But he ended up taking it over. That was the most fun that I've ever had doing a campaign to this day. If they called me and asked me to do it again, like, hey, come back and be the Swagador, I'd do it in a heartbeat. Honestly, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And it was, they were tired. I mean, they shut it down. They for whatever reason, it's kind of stupid. A lot of my other games are still being played because they're easy. It's the harder thing to do, right? So I also think that it was just the most significant personally for me, because it's that moment that I realized that being able to know how to communicate on social media is probably a much more important skill today than being able to write a television commercial or a print ad or a paid ad, or an influencer paid ad type thing, UGC style. Like just being able to authentically be able to talk and do this sort of organic thing.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It used to be you create an ad and the goal would be like word of mouth, and you'd have people repeating, I can't believe I ate the whole thing, try it, you'll like it. And like that created brand lift, which made it easier to sell and all that stuff. Social media amplifies that. So to this day, if you create a really viral ad on TV, it'll probably do better on social than on TV, right? Like you only have to create one creative billboard in order to have that shared all over the world now. You don't have to have billboards all over the place, just one creative one, because it'll be shared on social media. But there's also this technique that you can use. You can just go straight to the gossip column. You can just go straight in there, and you can be a part of the word of mouth. Where as a brand, you've never been able to do that before. You just have to know how to kind of authentically do it, right? And it's just like the personal brand, people doing personal, I hate that word personal brand, but I'm learning that you just have to use it. People who are trying to build their own personal brands, right? Same thing, right? It's like, how do I enter this conversation, speak authentically, and do these things? And that's a more than answer that question. I think there's some juicy advice in there about social media, at least.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for telling us about that. I think when you
And if
started
you're
off saying
listening,
people like never.
Swagbucks, I will totally come back. I mean what I said. Or if there are any other brands out there that want me to do that for them, like, you don't understand. I will jump on that.
Justin's ready. He's at the ready for this. Okay. Cool.
We should
Well,
do that for Laetro. I think we talked about it,
okay.
didn't we? I think we
Oh,
did. Yeah.
okay. Well, it sounds like
Word
it's
games.
working. Oh, you mean okay? Yeah, of course. Yeah, I was gonna say for anyone listening, you said Swaganomics,
Swaganigans.
swag
You go
anigans.
to
I'm so sorry.
swagbucks.com to the blog. I think
Yeah.
there are like 3 or 4 examples that are still there.
I happened across it when I was trying to learn more about a game you were telling me, so that's why I was like, "Oh!"
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, more, word games on the beach. But cool, Justin, this was very illuminating and, very fun, and so thank you so much for joining, and for anyone listening, for everyone listening, all of the creatives, thank you so much for your questions. It definitely, obviously just made this, event, and yeah, we will be doing this again soon, and thank you so much for joining us, and we'll, see you on the beach.
no problem.
Bye.
Bye.